Good evening, everybody. I would like to call this hybrid Finance and Facilities Committee meeting to order. And we will begin with a roll call, starting with Dr. Whiting.
Ross Whiting, present.
Mia Blitzstein, present.
Jenny Lauman, present.
Charles Riddell Williams, present.
Zachary Epps, present.
Leah Mulhern, present.
Robin Murphy, present.
Dan Schultz, present. The next item on the agenda is approval of the previous meeting's minutes. I guess we'll do both at once for Facilities and Financial Affairs.
So moved.
Charles Riddell Williams first, Leah Mulhern second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. And I believe Mr. Swigert will kick off the first agenda item.
Yes, so tonight's meeting is a little different in that we are going to have the Facilities and the Finance meeting at the same time, because the purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss the district's feasibility study, which of course involves both the Facilities and the Finance meeting, or Finance committees, and is some of our most important work at this point as part of our strategic plan for the district. So our first agenda item is a presentation by KCBA. KCBA are the architects who have been working with the district to help develop our strategic plan and our feasibility study. And without further ado, I will turn it over to them.
Hello. Sorry about that. Push button for green light when you speak. That's right. Just follow the instructions. I'm sorry. As I was saying, obviously the study that we had shared with you in the past is now available online. So we wanted to have an opportunity tonight again to kind of go quickly, just very fast through some of those recommendations, and then be here for questions. Answer any questions you have in an effort to try to map out what next steps are. A lot of times we do studies and you get to the end, you go, okay, now what? Well, this is that moment. So we want to be able to answer any questions you have so that you guys can start making some choices moving forward. So just looking at slides, and the design team with me tonight from KCBA is Jim Kiefer. Many of you have met Drew Levine from Revision, who's our sustainability consultant and a resident of Cheltenham. So that team, along with Snyder Hoffman Engineers, has been the group that for the last year has been jumping through all of your buildings and looking at several options. So it's a much larger effort than any one or two people. Every time we study these things, we're looking at the operational needs and the educational needs of your buildings. So again, every time we're looking at a roof and a window, we're also talking to your principals about special education spaces. How are these classrooms functioning, or are they not? What challenges do you face in your buildings? In the past, you guys have done a tremendous amount of work at many of your schools. You've got 3 brand new elementary schools, the great renovation at Myers, and obviously the reconstruction of Cedarbrook. Most of what we've been talking, so you've got a great leg up. Most of what we're talking about are the 2 buildings that aren't on that list, being Elkins Park and the high school. So this, again, the study of your district was much easier than others because we've got 5 really good examples of some tremendous buildings. So what we talked about was a roadmap of trying to talk about some items of what could occur at Elkins Park and that site, looking at the high school infrastructure, some ideas of options for the district office, and then moving ahead with some advantages at the athletic fields. Over the past year plus, meeting with principals, walking through your buildings, meeting with you, there was a lot of collaboration and a lot of conversation within your district. What we've learned was the existing Elkins Park building should be replaced. The building itself is in a state of so much need that the menu of things that's needed starts to sound like what you would do in a brand new building anyway. One of the biggest challenges there is the walls there are all load bearing, meaning you really can't move them, and all of those classrooms are undersized. So it is would be a very costly and difficult building to try to renovate and bring up to modern educational standards. So the recommendation from that study was to move on from that building. So great, how do we do that? So when we look at, first thing you want to look at is enrollment in your district. Are you growing? Are you shrinking? What we found was that certainly in the primary grades, K to 5, you are growing. There is some potential there over the next 10 years for growth. What do we do with 5th and 6th grade? What's the right model for that? Right now, obviously, you have K to 4, then kids move to 5, 6, then they move again for 7 and 8 and go again to a high school. Is there an opportunity here, possibly with the split up of Elkins Park, to go to a more traditional 6-8 middle school, bring 5th grade back to the elementary school? So you'd have 2 movements for kids coming out of elementary school rather than 3. So again, maybe some advantages there. We looked at Cedarbrook and said, that's, again, basically a brand new building. Could 6th grade fit there? We said, well, almost, with a couple of classrooms maybe along we'll call that the rear facade, the facade that faces 309. Easy little bar of 2-story classrooms there. We think we could have enough capacity there for 6th grade to move into the middle school. Obviously, next steps of that would be to talk with the principals and make sure, what type of classrooms do we want to build. It might not just be 6th grade classrooms. Maybe they're science labs, because the old science labs can become 6th grade rooms. So those kind of conversations would occur, but an easy enough addition at the middle school would allow 6th grade to move over. Great, there's 6th grade. Now what do you do with 5th? 5th grade could be a little bit more of a challenge, just because some of those elementary schools it was tougher to expand. But we saw Glenside as an opportunity to expand that school to allow 5th grade to move in and kind of filter back to the other 4 elementary schools. Some of the other schools did have a little bit of room, but at Glenside, maybe an addition there could, again, offset some of the challenges from bringing 5th grade back into the school. And then lastly on this chart is just a lot of future opportunities at Elkins Park. A lot of questions that we got. Well, could it be this? Well, could it be that in the future? Yes, could be anything in the future. In the short term, you would take that building down. We're working in Methacton School District right now. They're taking an old elementary school down that they haven't been in 10 years. You're going to take it down, basically make it a meadow, so it just kind of looks like high grass. Or you could take that down and make it fields for sports. That is a tremendous site and certainly something that has endless opportunities. But in the immediate future, just kind of bringing that building down, restoring some of that land there, and keeping that as a really great commodity for your community and your district. So those are the things we kind of saw, and so out of that we said, all right, there's kind of 3 pathways to consider. One was maintaining the 5-6 center, essentially rebuilding it. Well, as I said, renovating is not recommended, and rebuilding would be pretty expensive. So we said, all right, well, what other options are there? The other 2 would be to close Elkins Park and, again, to move 6th grade into Cedarbrook, move 5th grade into the elementary school. And then the third option there was doing that in an effort to then maybe in the future build an early learning center. Could be an early learning center, could be a variety of different things there, but like I said, kind of having that third option open by maintaining Elkins Park, the site, making sure that you guys still have that. Again, taking that building down does not mean you can't put it back or a different type of building in the future. It allows you any possibility that you would like on that site. So the pathways that we were kind of looking at of those 3, the second one seemed to make the most sense, because it essentially also allows you someday to come back and build and work on that option 3. So we are looking at other projects. If we looked at that pathway 1, if we're building a new 5-6 center, obviously that was the largest investment, $80 million to build a school. You're talking about 700 students. 700 students now. We'll really be planning for about 800 students in the future, so that's a pretty big building. We're also trying to look at budgeting for HVAC options at the high school. That may not be all HVAC everywhere, that may be parts of the building, but trying to create a number that at least allowed you to address some of the issues there and do some improvements that are needed at the high school. We talked about a $10 million investment at the stadium. That is still scheduled to happen next summer, to rebuild the stadium, new track, new field, new bleachers, new concession stands and toilet rooms. So that is in the process of being documented and approved. And then, maybe there's some money for renovating part of the district office. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, either maintaining this building or in some other options. But in that pathway one, you were looking at an investment of over $120 million. Pathway two, you see the addition at Cedar Brook and in an addition at Glenside being much less expensive than an $80 million new building. So when you add those two together, kind of take out the 80 and add, in this case, 35, continue with the HVAC at the high school and the stadium and the district office, you're looking at budgeting a total investment there at about $75 million. Instead of the addition at Glenside, if the idea was to move right to the Early Learning Center, that's a smaller building. The reason that's 53 and the other was 80, it's a smaller building. There's not big gyms, there's not big science labs like you would have at a middle school. So that building would be a little less of a cost, but that is a new building at Elkins Park, and now you're back up over $113 million again. So between those three pathways, and again, nothing ever happens overnight, obviously the least investment monetarily wise was option two, and it allows us to move away from the Elkins Park building, have that addition at the middle school, bring fifth grade back into the K-5 model, as well as have some investments in other areas like the stadium and the high school and the district office that are needed. So, as I said, recommendations was to move on with that middle school project, look at an addition at Glenside, monitor future enrollment, and then in the future, look at renovating this building or other options for the district office. So that was it. Next steps, as I said, was a night like tonight, getting some community feedback, understanding as well that plans for any expansion take a lot of time. Anytime you're building anything new, whether it's a new building or an addition, it can easily take up to 12 months for land development. That's all approvals and stormwater management, things like that, and then it could take easily a year or more to construct. So as you're thinking about these things and thinking about budgeting and time, even if you said yes tonight, nothing's open until the 2026 school year. So things do take a little bit of time to occur. And again, meanwhile, the high school stadium upgrades are still online for next summer.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
No problem.
So are there, we'll start with questions and comments from the board. Anyone have? Mr. Epps?
Thanks again for the presentation. It's always encouraging when we didn't hear something dramatically, significantly different this time than the last presentation, so it's good. Consistency is key. In the recommendations, the Glenside addition, essentially if K to 1 is going to stay in the building, the addition is required?
Yes,
At Glenside.
if you're taking fifth grade and moving that into the existing 4 buildings you have now, there's some that fit a little easier than others, and there's really the 3 other buildings would be very challenging, if not impossible, really, to expand. So we chose Glenside mainly for the reason because it can. Then when you build that, you do have the ability to maybe move some district special ed functions to that building to try to alleviate some of the, maybe open up another classroom at Myers, maybe open up another classroom someplace else. So building in one spot is better than trying to build additions on all 4. And like I said, it's not an option, unfortunately, at some of the other schools just because they're so landlocked. No, as soon as Elkins Park comes down, you need a place for fifth grade. So you could build the middle school, keep fifth grade at Elkins Park, but that you still have all the issues with Elkins Park. So as soon as that building comes down, it's, in a way, sixth grade was easy, fifth grade was the challenge. How does that filter its way back in?
And we're probably saving like financial questions for later.
Yes, so there will be a second presentation right after these sets of board questions from Mr. Swigart around the financial side.
All right, thanks.
Any other board questions? Ms. Levin.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. One about if an addition were to be added to Glenside, would there be some parking expansion there at that site? Because parking is already pretty tight there.
Yeah, again, you would need to, because we're essentially adding capacity there. You're adding parents, you're adding teachers. Now, those kids won't drive, so, but you are adding, 4, 6, 8 new classrooms. So it may not be a large amount of parking that would be required, but certainly some would be required. Then it comes back to, well, how much can we build a few more spaces than what's required to try to help with that? Even though that site is the one that would be more easily expanded, it's still tight. So it's not like we have tons of extra space, but we could certainly look at that as part of that study to not only fulfill what may be required by the township, but can we add a few more spots to help out as well.
The other question I had was about the administrative building. Is there a recommendation at this point to like Elkins Park, do something with this building, or is that sort of has to be held off if we need these other things to happen?
Yeah, I mean, all the options for this is kind of a similar conversation with Elkins Park. Adults can adapt a little bit better than elementary school kids.
Right.
So one of the interesting things that we saw with this building is it's much bigger than it needs to be, and it's great in the fact that some people have some larger offices. But what else are you doing with that space? It's there, so you just filled in because essentially it's an old school, it's old classrooms. So if you were going to rebuild or move someplace else, you would not certainly need the size of this space that you have now. So we looked at options of moving those offices into the high school. We looked at options of, is there an office or something else that's rentable nearby? The district office is something that, again, no offense to all the adults that are in this building, but that's not as high of a priority as, quite frankly, the children. So they can get by. There's things that we can fix along the way. It is important to have a good working space as well for all those administrators, but there are other options that may come up along the way. There's constantly in the community office space that's becoming available. We did look at a few buildings and they didn't pan out, but who knows, there may be a call tomorrow to say, hey, here's 20,000 square feet. What do you think about moving in there? So I think this building and with the facilities group keeping this operational is something that they can do. If we want to spend a few more dollars to fix a boiler or add a few things along the way, hey, great. But you probably don't want to invest a lot of money into this building because at some point, again, it's relocating to another facility to be determined later.
Thank you, Ms. Levin. Mr. Burdell Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So a couple questions, comment. The first, just thinking about our high school, I know what we've discussed tonight or during this presentation is just the air conditioning, right? Like an HVAC, because we know that there's a glaring challenge at that building, right? Extremely hot in there. But it is also a very old building. So just wanted to understand if there was consideration about other projects, like other than just the HVAC that might be on our radar. And also, second part of that question is, since we weren't talking about completely rebuilding the high school, what does that say about the building? Is the structure
Yeah.
in good shape, et cetera?
It's funny, we were just talking about that tonight before the meeting started. And, I feel like things go in cycles. A couple of years ago, everybody was building elementary schools. Now I think we have 5 or 6 active high school projects going on. Most of them are additions and renovations. So yeah, there's a few groups that are building new high schools, but that's an older building, but the way it's laid out is fine. Sure, it could use some additional spaces, and as STEM, we did that STEM renovation with you guys about 5 years ago now. As some of the needs of some specialty spaces like that open up, there's things you can do internally, and there could be things that you do externally. We've seen a lot of schools build kind of a new row of new classrooms along the front, and now it looks like a brand new building when 80% of the building is the old high school behind it. So I think that building, even in its age, is certainly not in the condition that Elkins Park is in, and has the ability to adapt over time. So there could be the 20-year plan, the 30-year plan, the 50-year plan for that building. I think but then it all comes down to funds and priority. So air conditioning is a big priority there. Absolutely, indoor air quality is very, very important. That can be done on its own, or it could be part of a larger project. As soon as it's a larger project, now it costs more money. So I think if you, unlike this building, investing in the HVAC in that building does make sense, because I don't know, that's not a building we walk into and go, yep, you got to take that down. Elkins Park, we kind of walked in and went, yeah, this should probably move away from. But the high school in its current state, yes, it needs to be updated, and certainly could benefit from some more modern STEM spaces and science rooms and things like that. That's not a building that I think needs to come down anytime soon, and certainly could last 50 more years with some investment into it, and then, like I said, maybe some creative, more modern educational spaces created from within, or even as additions.
Got it. I appreciate that clarification as well, because I know, high school flagship building, a lot happening there, and, equally as old as Elkins Park. So thank you for that clarity. The second question is around the capacity, if you will. If we're moving away from Elkins Park, and we will be moving, if we do move forward with moving sixth grade into Cedarbrook and 5th back into elementary schools, do we have to do the Glenside addition immediately, or is that something that can phase in, just thinking about what, HVAC at the high school, et cetera? Like what are how do the priorities kind of
It
lay
would be
out?
very tight. Absolutely, you have to do an addition at Cedarbrook to get 6th grade.
Right.
When we looked at that, because that was one of the first questions, it's 350 kids moved into 4 buildings. So call it, round up and call it 100 kids in each building. That's 4 classrooms. There's 1 in one building, there's 2 in another, but that's not 4 in any. So that'd be tight. So what happens when that happens is special education moves out, art goes on a cart, music goes on the stage. So we could study that and look at that, but you're going to be overcrowded immediately. And that enrollment study, again, said that your elementary school age children are going to grow over the next 10 years. So if you didn't, whatever that next step is should be thought of quickly. So if you wanted to do the high school and move 5th grade in, and the promise was, hey, in 5 years we're going to do that early learning center. Okay, well, maybe we can find some ways to get by in a couple of years. Maybe there is some, I know you guys got away from modular trailers, but maybe some of those have to come back, for a few years at 1 or 2 of those schools to get, just to alleviate the overcrowding of that and make sure that you have proper spaces for art and music and special ed. That's something we can dig into further, but you would need to be making a decision. Something has to be done within, let's say, 5 years of closing Elkins Park and moving the 5th grade in before you're really bursting at the seams. And then you would have modular trailers everywhere, and everywhere being the 4 elementary schools. So that was a very early question. Can't we just move 5th grade in? And you really can't. I mean, you could to maybe start, but again, I would want that to be really, really brief.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burdell Williams. Ms. Blitzstein.
Thank you. Thank you again for the presentation. I have one question and one sort of comment question sort of for us. The first question is about the admin building. And is the cost calculated to add offices onto the high school? Does that exceed the estimated cost of renovations to this building?
No. The difference is if you moved, in the one scheme where we were talking about moving the admin into the side of the high school where I think some of the tech shops are now, which is nice because that's basically the pathway that would lead up to the stadium. You have a whole lot of parking there. When you mix district offices with an educational facility, you want to make sure that I know where the office is and where the front door is. So all of that would work. So that would be $6.5 million or whatever that number was that you wouldn't have to put in here. But as soon as you put that in there, there's a cost, and then where do those rooms go? So what was popping out was an addition onto the high school, which then leads us down the path of, okay, well, if we're building that addition, shouldn't it be a little bit bigger? And now all of a sudden, the 24 million, call it 30 million. If you take the 6 out of here, put 30 into the high school, I don't know that that gets you air conditioning and the district office and an addition and the amount of addition that you're going to want and the addition over there and the art person wants this and the music person wants that. That's probably not enough yet at that point. The high school renovation has many steps. The 24 million is basically just bare bones HVAC in the existing building. Everything after that starts to increase that cost.
Thank you. Just thinking about the cost also to run this building, not just costs to upkeep it. My other just sort of comment was, and this is, I don't know if anyone can answer this question here at all, but how do we track our population in terms of being able to monitor new families that are coming in? I saw like a Melrose Park Country Club proposal coming for development. How does that get monitored? Like how do we predict how many more kids we might see if our elementary populace is growing? Like what makes sense in terms of investment if we foresee it growing more?
Well, yeah, I mean, you guys did a study of that showed that there was some growth coming. Obviously, you never know when the next, golf course is going to be taken over and housing comes. But you always want to make sure that you're in a window where you have that flexibility if that occurs. Moving 5th grade into the elementary school, again, to that point earlier, gives you much less flexibility unless something occurred, an addition, the early learning center, or something like that. So as between the county and other enrollment studies, that's what it's projecting. Obviously, in partnerships with the local community and Cheltenham Township, open dialogue of, hey, let us know if somebody comes up and in a planning commission meeting talks about building 100 houses someplace. Keep us in the loop. So having that good rapport with them just to understand if anything is coming is important. I think the study showed as well, and a lot of communities were kind of considered older communities, meaning their kids went through, but now they're in their 60s and 70s. The house is still there. When that gets turned over, guess who moves in? So I think they were calculating that as well, and when they were predicting the proposed influx of elementary school kids over the next 10 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board questions or comments? Ms. Mulhern.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, it's good to see you all and see where we are with our plans and ideas. I just want to make sure I understand. We've kind of touched on this a few times. Let's pretend this option 2, we have an addition at Cedar Brook for 6th grade. We have an addition at Glenside that prevents us from having that kind of really difficult, almost impossible getting the 5th grade in everywhere. But if I'm understanding that correctly, that's with where our population is now. That doesn't include the growth that is coming. So regardless, we do need to be thinking about what to do when that happens, when we get closer to that 10-year mark. But we can't think about it at year 9. We have to think about it now. Is that, I'm understanding that correctly, right? The addition, I know we're not talking about the money, but the option we saw in the second one includes that smaller addition to Glenside.
That actually was the larger addition.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's a mix there in between.
Okay.
So when we're building, say 5 or let's say 6 classrooms on Glenside, great. That's enough for maybe the influx of today. But if we're building 6, shouldn't we build 8? Maybe we build 10 because
Right.
now I've got a little bit more space. So
Okay.
that number of 14 was the larger
Okay.
of the 2 options, and we could be a middle ground of those things.
Okay.
I do think that would be better for the 10-year plan, but if there's a plan to say, no, within year 7 or before 10 years, we really, really want to build this new early learning center, then maybe we do start with a
Okay.
smaller one.
Okay. No, that helps and clarifies that for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mulhern. Any other board questions? I had one question around impact on which students are going to which schools with the addition to Glenside, because I know we don't have, in the current configuration from last month's meeting, we wouldn't have enough space in our other elementary schools without changing something.
Right.
And so I was curious because that's an important part of this conversation, what are, I know there are solutions that don't involve disrupting the entire student population and changing boundaries, but I was wondering if we could learn more about that.
So let me go ahead and take that. We would really be looking at programs. Last thing I really want to go through is doing any type of redistricting. So we would want to see what programs are in certain elementary schools that could go into the additional space built at Glenside. And that would all be grounded in the numbers at those respective schools to see what that would need to look like. So not there yet, but that's how we would go about exploring that option.
Thank you. All right. So I wanted to, just as a process point, we did go to board questions arguably a little prematurely because there is a second half around the finances. And so before we go to public questions, because I know we have a large amount of the public, I think it's important for us to all be informed about the financial side of this conversation as well, so that way those comments can be. Are you able to stick around? Okay, great, because we will get back to, I'm sure there will be questions that you'll be in the best position to answer. So given that, Mr. Swigert, could you give that presentation?
Now it's on. Solid. All right. So when we look at the cost of these potential projects, we have to first determine, well, how are we going to pay them, and what is the impact going to be to the community of Cheltenham? Our largest source of revenue is real estate taxes. So obviously, the first place we look is in the district's taxes and potential future tax increases. When we look at Cheltenham School District, we have the highest tax rate in the county. So this isn't the path that we should be going to try and pay for most of our financial considerations. We should try and lay off the tax rate as much as possible to be proper stewards of our district funds. The next place we went to look is our borrowing capacity. How much debt could possibly be incurred to fund these projects? When we look at our current revenue levels and we look at our borrowing capacity, our remaining borrowing capacity is only $146 million. So that's very limiting. Obviously, we don't want, just like you wouldn't want to go in your personal life, the district wouldn't want to reach the top of its borrowing capacity. That wouldn't be wise, and that would leave no future space for any other additional emergencies or large preventative maintenance projects that may occur in the future. So what is a proper borrowing capacity? When we look at this chart, the district is right around 8.5%, 9% of total expenditures in its borrowing capacity. In its debt service level. That puts it right around the middle of the pack when it comes to the county, and right around the middle of the pack when it comes to school districts around the Delaware Valley. What is the max rate we see out there? It's generally around 12%. Do we want to go as high as 12%? We'll try not to go as high as 12%, but that would be the max limit. So how much debt would that realistically leave for the district if it were to incur debt to fund these projects? And that would roughly leave about $60 million. So if we look at current available resources, that's the quickest place to go to look for funds. We do have some reserves from prior years, from prior positive financial performance. So we do have $23 million in our general fund, and we have $12 million in our cap reserve fund. We're hoping to have future surpluses that will add to that balance. And if we look at that potential debt service of $60 million, that leaves a maximum available for capital projects of 102, a max recommendation of 102 million. Again, not the amount we want to go to, but a realistic number that we could afford or we could look to reach. Going back to what Mike just presented, we had 3 pathways. We had pathway number 1 at 121 million. That was to maintain status quo and to move forward with existing structures, upgraded, of course. Pathway 2, to close EP, to look at our targeted additions at the Cedar Brook Middle School and at Glenside. And Pathway 4, that was to close EP, look at a targeted addition at the middle school, and to look at a new early K-1 learning center. I'm going to focus on Pathway 2 and 3 because of the cost. So if we take a look at the utility impact, the staffing impact, and the debt impact by making these pathway moves, you can see that by upgrading our facilities, by reducing our square footage, and that's primarily the primary driver of reduced utility cost and staffing is reduced square footage. It would in essence save us an annual cost of $600,000, and that's not necessarily staff reductions, staff reallocations that could be made. And when you look at the total debt required, that's $2.1 million of debt, so we wouldn't have to issue a full $60 million bond. It would be a reduced bond issuance, a total annual budget impact of $1.5 million, which roughly equates to a 1.75% tax increase. So that's the financial impact with going down pathway number 2. Pathway number 3 obviously comes with a little higher cost. It has a higher square footage footprint, so not quite the utility cost savings, not quite the staffing savings, and a larger debt impact. A total tax increase required of 4% to go down pathway number 3. And the last piece I wanted to look at was our future debt service, because these decisions are more than just a 5 or 10 year decision. A debt issuance is 20 to 30 years in length, so that's in essence what the ramifications of any sort of future debt issuance. Sure. So when we look at pathway number 2, the blue part of this graph represents our current debt service of the district, and the orange would represent the additional debt service. You can see by only adding as little debt service as possible, it really leaves a lot of space on the back end for a potential high school project. As Charles, I believe, mentioned, our high school is currently one of our oldest buildings as well. It's had significant renovations. It's had a lot of upkeep put into it over the years, and it's still in good conditions, but the bare bones of the buildings are circa 1955, 1960. So the window has to be kept open down the road for a potential project at the high school. Looking at current high school projects in the Delaware Valley are ranging anywhere from 150, 175, 200 million. So looking in that time frame, what kind of debt service would we need for a high school project down the road? We would need almost all of that entire blue debt service line to meet that demand. So The more of that debt capacity we use up now, the more difficult it's going to be to fund a project in the future. So trying to keep our debt down and trying to be as prudent and as frugal as possible now is going to pay off in the long term. We look at pathway number 3, obviously that annual debt service represented by this chart really begins to shrink when we get to the point where we're done paying off our elementary schools in Cedar Brook. So that blue line you see on this chart, that has a hard drop off. All of our debt was structured so that it's level funded and it's equal until right about 2041, at which point it drops off and we reset to 0 under the assumption we issue no new debt at this point in time. So, Charles, to answer your question about what does a future high school project look like and what does the timing look like, if you're asking me, from a purely financial lens, what is the most prudent path forward? It's to preserve as much of that future debt capacity as possible and look at a full replacement project down the road. All right, that was.
Thank you, Mr. Swigard. Are there any board questions or comments about, and if you thought of anything from the previous half of the presentation, please feel free to raise it now on any of this. Ms. Blitzstein.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I guess my thoughts, I have a lot of thoughts, but layering or sort of like thinking about the facilities question in shifts and looking at this debt service over the next 20 years, I guess. If we don't have to start everything now, I guess is my question. Do we have to start everything now?
No.
The answer was no.
No. So I know, and I thank the public for being so patient. We are going to get to you. We're being as transparent as we can. Financially, we are trying to put forth the best recommendation, which makes sense through a financial lens. I've only been in the district now for 3 years, but my entire time here, I've recognized that from a facility standpoint, there has been significant challenges at EP. And subsequently, we have this year very intentionally tried to allocate additional monies there, but that's just a Band-Aid. The infrastructure of EP is not solid at all. That's why we had professionals come in and do that evaluation. You guys have allowed and afforded me to be superintendent. For the consideration of the public, it's what do we need to address first and foremost, and there will be a phased approach. The public, of course, just like the board, is going to have a voice. My most pressing piece right now is figuring out how do we shut down EP, and I'm very transparent from that standpoint, where the addition at Cedar Brook and figuring out what we need to do at the K through 4 level right now is most paramount. That AC at the high school, from my perspective, is paramount. And that is just a start. You know, we're looking at the stadium. As I've stated since I've been here, it's the same stadium that I played on in 1983, and it probably goes back further than that. We recognize there's other fields that need to be addressed, such as baseball, softball, what have you, but that has to be phased in. So there is going to be a need for a phased in approach. But you see that there is limited resources, and that's why we have to be very intentional around what we prioritize. So I say no, but there are certain non-negotiables that as a district, I feel we really have to address. my number one priority, based on the reports and what I've seen, we have to address EP first and foremost, and then prioritize from there. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, it does.
Thank you, Ms. Blitzstein. Any other? Mr. Epps?
Appreciate those comments, especially because you were focusing on finance and like a study, but this also involves the brand of the district and what people know us by. And people are making decisions currently based upon EP and the status of the building and whether they want to send their children there or not. So definitely, we take that into consideration as well. And so, but to the point around the annual increase to tax, is that a one-time increase, or would we need to increase taxes every year for a certain amount of time by that percentage?
So that's if you accomplish it all in 1 year, that would be a one-time increase. So
Oh, okay.
Mike is on for that. One-time increase. So if it's a 4%, it could be 1% over 4 years or 4% in 1 year.
Okay, so we have options how to actually do it over time, but total we would need 1.75.
Correct.
And then that no matter what pathway we go down, that figure represents facilities. So if there are other increase, can you kind of talk about the implications if there's increase in costs in other areas as well?
Yes, so that would just purely be a facility debt increase. If you're talking about the cost of staffing, the cost of health benefits, the cost of special education, those would be additional considerations on top of a debt service cost.
And we've heard in other presentations that some of those costs are increasing as well.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And I'm asking and this is really for the public as well, because we have to take this into consideration, not just what this costs, but also what are other costs for the district that we know are increasing over time, and how we put that into consideration for this as well. So I know we've heard some of that before, but I wanted to get some of it just for we have probably some new folks attending tonight.
I appreciate you teeing it up. The number one takeaway from the budget, staffing costs, including wages and benefits, is 70% of what the district expenditures are. So anything related to staffing, anything related to annual increases feeds right into that 70%.
Thank you, Mr. Epps. Ms. Lohman?
Mr. Swigert, I just want to make sure I understand. Could you go back to slide number 7, please? So if we were to go with pathway number 2, we would have to enact a 1.75% tax increase. That's this annual budget. So it would one time.
So the annual debt service would be $2 million on the debt. The annual reductions in utilities and staffing. Sorry, I don't think that's my phone.
It's somebody on
The annual impact to utility costs reductions and staffing reallocations is $600,000. So the annual impact is a one-time impact, which is reoccurring, of course, but tax increases are reoccurring as well. So a 1.75% increase.
So the tax increase is one time, but it would result in recurring revenue through that one-time increase. So that the increase of 1.75 would reflect income for the next forever, but it would not be an increase that occurs multiple times. It would be a
Okay.
one-time increase.
Understood. All right. Thank you for that explanation.
I should clarify a lot of assumptions in this. This is our best educated guess based on what we know at this time.
Ms. Mulhern?
I'm going to kind of piggyback on Jenny, take that one step further to go back to something you said when you were answering Mr. Epps' question, which was, so, again, for example, lots of assumptions, but the third pathway, it sounded like you said if we chose to do that, the 4% would not need to occur in 1 year.
Correct.
So for example, this is just a hypothetical, we could say every year for the next 4 years, we will raise the taxes by 1.02% to cover our debt service.
Correct.
And by the end of that, we would have gotten to, I mean, those numbers might be.
Yes,
oh,
just as you can phase in a tax increase, you can phase in debt as well.
the-
to
okay,
match
so we
that.
could phase them in to match each other and, okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Mulhern. Any other board questions or comments? And I do want to underscore that the one-time nature of the tax increase. Tax increases are serious and taken seriously. However, we're not talking about a 10% tax increase over 5 years. To solve this problem, to me, reading this as one board member who's been co-chair of the Financial Affairs Committee for the past 6 years, I'm struck that the work that the administration and our helpful team of consultants have done to try to reflect our financial realities is striking, and I think it is reflected in what we just witnessed. So I just wanted to publicly thank you all for that work. One question around, actually, sorry, were there any other board comments before I go into my, okay. One question around the debt service rates. Are those based in today's interest rates, or are you accounting for potential
Today's
refinancing?
So before you answer,
Sure.
from here on out, I will
Oh,
invest in
do
a
you wanna-
longer, I will invest in a longer stem. You're gonna have to actually pick that up and speak into the microphone
Okay.
because people here, and we have 92 attendees, they're having a hard time hearing.
All right, understood.
Thanks. The debt service interest rate was the question. Is that
So
based
that's
on
based
today's?
on today's rates, today's assumptions, not future refundings.
So eventually, when society reharmonizes and interest rates go down, what percentage flux? I know we're not banking on it, but do you have a sense of what that number could go down percentage-wise?
I would think it's 2 or 3%.
2 or 3%. So nothing.
So school district debt is really staggered. The longer out you are, obviously, the higher interest rate on those pieces of principal. So it's really like a blended rate of 1 to 3%, depending on length.
Great. Okay. Thank you. All right. I know we're going to get a question about this, and that is around the. Oh, yeah.
I think he has to come.
Yeah. At this point, you might as well. That's fine. You might want to, if you want your laptop, you're welcome to. So I know the question will come up, and it is around the administration building. I know it's a lower priority for all the reasons stated in the it's lowest on the list. It's also not the highest in cost, but it is still $6 million. And I also know that we have had the township is going through a facilities study right now, and they're looking at their administration buildings. And so I wanted to know if we could just comment on the programmatic impacts of what we've been thinking about around admin and just what that
Sure.
conversation's been like.
I got it. So, bottom line, from our standpoint right now, what makes most sense for us if we were to make a move is to attach it to the high school. That is, as Mr. Burdell Williams alluded to earlier, the flagship of the district, and our immediate support should be closest to our largest school. We've had preliminary dialogue with the township, and I'm going to leave it right there. We've had preliminary dialogue with the township. If something were to evolve that made sense, of course we would consider it. But that's why I preface by saying what makes most sense for us in a move would to do something attached to the high school. So thank you for the question. Hope that clarifies. But that's truly going to be a working project, a work in progress if anything were to come out of that.
Thank you, Dr. Scriven. All right. So I just, again, reiterate the thanks for all of the energy that has gone into this. And for members of the public who are we have, I think at one point there was over 100 people. Say that again? 110. So welcome. Glad you're here. So this has been a long and public conversation. And I also just wanted to highlight that to me, and frankly, it's been a conversation since even before Dr. Scriven was here, in that we all knew that Elkins Park needed work and the high school needed work. And it's always been a matter of when can we address it. We had a strategic planning process, and to me that kind of was the prelude to this process. And that was a very public, deep conversation that involved lots of different types of stakeholders. And one thing that came out of it was the need for us to seriously develop a capital improvement plan focusing on these facilities. So with that, I think we should move to the public. Yes? Once. Right. So the process for public I was just getting a clarifying point around the process for public comment, and just reminder to reiterate some very important things. We have, for those attending on Zoom, there is a Q&A section. In order for your question to be read, you need to say your name and where you reside within the district. And that is part of first and last name and where you reside within the district, because it's part of public record. If you are in person, you would be invited to just walk up to the mic. And again, state your name and where you reside within the district. And also, I believe on Zoom, folks could raise their hand if they would like to speak their question instead of typing their question. And once again, you would start with your name and where you reside within the district. And because we have so many people, we will be asking folks to limit their comments to 3 minutes. So we'll be keeping track, and we won't cut the mic off at the 3-minute mark, but we will ask you to wrap it up if it gets to that point. So, with that said, are there any comments? And please, yeah.
Hello, I'm Crystal Clark, and I live in Wyncote. I'm also the principal of Elkins Park School. And so I had a few questions. So when you were mentioning about Elkins Park and the high school, and I do respect the concern regarding the high school, and I do understand it is the flagship school. But as we consider the transition of Elkins Park students, I ask that you give consideration to our dedicated teachers, administrators, and our adolescent learners to make sure that they have the same opportunity of resources and the same opportunity for their bright, spacious buildings. It's something to being somewhere that feels open and inviting and bright. Whenever our students visit any of the other schools in the district, it's like, wow. And they feel a letdown when they come back to EP. I had the pleasure of being part of a new building build in this district when I was the principal of one of the elementary schools of Wyncote. And at that time, there was a lot of community voice. There was a lot of excitement. There was a lot of renderings of the new building. Everybody kind of got involved and included in that process. But for EP, it doesn't represent that. It represents loss. It represents change. I have staff who are concerned about where they're going to go, if they're still going to have a job. So as you make plans, think about all the other things that are the small things, but are very big to the staff members who work in that building, who have stuck by the district regardless of the condition of their building. I should have wore glasses. So I have as you consider the influx of students and additional grade levels in the elementary schools, will you be considering a vice principal now in the elementary school structure, the K-4 buildings? If you're adding additional students and additional staff, that's just something that you may want to consider. And also, if you're thinking of the Early Learning Center idea, if it is a K to first grade project that an Early Learning Center would be in, this would allow 8 classrooms from our current K to 4 buildings that would then be open for 5th graders to be able to go into their schools. So I'm not sure if your early learning project is just going to be kindergarten or preschool, but if you do consider kindergarten and first grade, that will open up many of those buildings without the need of a lot more construction.
So thank you for that. And let me just chime in by saying that as part of our contract, there are no furloughs, so no teacher is in jeopardy of losing their job with whichever direction this goes. I've been very careful with my wording because I'm not the ultimate voice. I just have one voice in the larger piece of what we're recommending. So very intentional around the work that's happened at EP, but EP was one of the main things that were brought to me when I even onboarded into this position as superintendent. And that's why we try to give you some love and attention from a facility standpoint this year, because we do recognize that a building does make a difference in terms of having a conducive learning environment. Second, we're going to look at what models make sense based on the numbers at the elementary schools, whether that would be a assistant principal if necessary or other. So I'm not going to lock myself into giving a 100% response to that, but every decision that we make is for the best interests of our students. So we're open to what exactly would create a model that would enhance the learning experience. So we thank you for posing those questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And feel free to, you don't need to raise your hand. You can just walk on up to the mic.
Hi, I'm Laura Esso. I live in Glenside. Question just about the K-1 Early Learning Center. If you could talk a little bit more about that. I have kids at Glenside, familiar with the current structure. I understand what you're talking about in terms of moving 5th and 6th and whatnot. The Early Learning Center, that I'm not quite as familiar with that idea and how that fits into the rest of the things that you've planned.
So I need to give a little clarity, and I think Dr. Clark kind of hit upon it. If we were going to go that direction, it would actually be a pre-K to 1, potentially, or just pre-K and kindergarten. Again, there's been no decisions made. What I do understand as an educator, and I heard the term brand mentioned earlier, is that we have to be very focused on making sure that our students are reading prior to 3rd grade. I'll be quite honest, if I could push that up to reading fluently by 1st grade, that would be incredible. So that's where that concept comes in, where we would tie in to other partners and really have a focused approach on literacy, which is key. That does not mean that it has to happen in that setting. It can easily happen right in the buildings where our students currently exist. And that's really why we're putting out to the public. So I appreciate your question, just to give a little more insight and clarity. But it's really the public's voice in terms of getting their feedback, which holds a lot of weight with the direction and what we consider to do.
Thank you. Before we go to the next, feel free to walk up. This is a quick one. The next steps, because I realize we didn't actually end by talking about what the next steps from here are, and you are alluding to it, but would you, Dr. Scriven, would you be able to talk about what are the next steps after this meeting?
So I'm going to tap into Mrs. Swigert and defer. I know that this presentation has been made public. Has the form for feedback gone live yet, or when would that?
So the whole purpose of this meeting is for community feedback. This meeting, the meeting made by Mike and KCBA and myself, is on Board Docs. It's available to the public. The idea is to get as much feedback as possible. Our plan is to push out a survey to get formal feedback, measurable feedback that we can take to the next Finance Committee meeting and review.
So what would be the timeline that survey would remain open?
So we would hope to review it by the next Finance Committee meeting, a month from today.
So we're looking at a 3-week period?
3 weeks, yes. I'm trying to get the official date.
Thank you, and I apologize for interrupting the flow, but it felt like a useful, please.
No problem. Kia Baker. I'm in the Cheltenham portion of Cheltenham Township, and just wanted to provide just some more community feedback as we do look at the physical conditions of the buildings, the financial impact of the township, that we also keep in mind, as I am hearing, the social impact of the students and the transitions that do occur because the children are only in EP for those 2 years. So there's a lot of challenging emotions, of course, as you can understand, from getting fourth graders into the large building, and then they're only there for a certain amount of time before they leave again. So as I share my feedback of putting the fifth grade back into the elementary school and the sixth grade into Cedar Brook so that there's only one big transition for those students, I think that would alleviate a lot of the social issues that the children have and just assimilating and finding their niche as they go through the Cheltenham School District. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tara Knox. I live in Wynkoop. I just want to thank you all. I know you all are very familiar with me and my questions and rants. I have a question about the high school athletic field. Is the field set to be complete for the start of the 2025 school year, or is it going to be under construction for that school year?
It would be under construction for that school year.
Okay. So if it's under construction for the school year, will we be renting additional fields for our sports for that season?
Yes, I've not even gotten to that point yet until we actually move forward with approval to break ground and go forth. But yeah, we're going to have to be very nimble and flexible with navigating that shift. That's going to be a heavy lift.
Okay. So an additional question. I'm not sure if we're able to pull up. I know at one point we saw a presentation of what the possible new field was going to look like. I did have a question in terms of the parking lot, if that was considered in that, and I'm not sure if that's on that diagram. And also the current field. Do we have a plan for the state of the current practice field and stadium field? I've brought up several times the concerns of injuries on our stadium field that have occurred with some of our football and soccer students. So if it's not going to be completed until possibly 2026, for now, what are we doing to make sure that that practice field and the stadium field is safe for them to be on?
So we have taken steps in terms of backfilling in those divots that once existed. I'm going to ask either Mr. Swigert or Mr. Holman to talk about the consultants that we've reached out to in terms of maintaining, overseeding, and all of that. I try not to get deep in the weeds, and I want to give you accurate information.
Okay. I just have one more comment / suggestion. Just for safety purposes, and I'm not sure if the field itself has to be redesigned once the stadium is going to be reconstructed, but if we could consider at least, so that we're not having to worry about the divots and keeping up with the grass, maybe putting a turf down now so that way we're not worrying about that, and then building around that as we get to the new stadium. That's just my biggest concern is the safety. I know how expensive and tedious it can be to keep up with grass. We don't have a water system out there to water that grass. They had to have a makeshift hose on, I believe, last summer to make sure it stayed hydrated properly. So are we going to continue to deal with those issues with the grass, or are we going to put something down that's requires less maintenance for the next 2 years?
So when we look at the project itself, it is a turf field. I've walked that field very recently. We can make an appointment. You can join me so we can walk that field because some of your concerns should no longer be concerns. So why don't we do that?
Okay.
Okay?
In the practice field. Is the practice field up to date?
Yes, ma'am. We can walk both.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you very much.
You are so welcome.
Thank you very much.
Can I just chime in?
Yes, please.
Jim, did you have an update on the stadium? Were you trying to chime in?
Good evening. I'm Jim Kiefer with KCBA. I've been managing the stadium project. Just for clarity, the scope is to put in a synthetic turf field, to rebuild the track to an 8-lane track, new synthetic surface, and to expand and replace all the bleachers. So we're going to increase the bleachers by about 3 times. In addition to that, we're rebuilding the gatehouse building because when we add all those bleachers, we need more bathrooms. So really, we're rebuilding the bathrooms, rebuilding the concession stand at the front, and using that as a safety feature, improving safety and security for the entire stadium. The project is currently at the township. This is all about land development. We are improving quite a bit of acreage over there, and that's what drives the process, is the long time it takes to get through land development. We've been talking to Cheltenham Township. We've addressed their zoning issues, and there is likely going to be a final zoning motion from them. The questionnaire was about the setbacks and where the bleachers are. And we also are talking to the township about the sewer that needs to be improved as part of the bathrooms. So right now, that's sort of the critical path, is getting through sewer and getting through zoning. The civil engineer is actively working on the design of those improvements, and the plan is to bid the project in the fall, get our contractors on board, and as soon as weather breaks in the spring, start construction next year, about this time next year. And the goal is to have the turf field workable for the football season. So that's.
Thank you. Yeah. Great detail.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Brian DePan. I live in Elkins Park. My question is for KCBA. In the slide for Pathway 2 and then your ultimate recommendation, I didn't notice a line item for the demo and site restoration at the existing Elkins Park property. So I just wanted to confirm that within whatever we're doing, that building is not going to be left just vacant.
Yeah, that's a good point. The plan would be, as I mentioned, that similar to what Methacton's looking at an elementary school, there would be to take that down. What they call restoring the site essentially just puts in grass. Anything above that is an added cost, like if you want to put in fields and things. But essentially the idea is just to take that down and restore the site to just kind of natural grasses and things. That would be, yes.
Thank you. Just and that was fine as a point of process. You're good. Questions can be directed to kind of the chair. That way, if it's possible that a member of administration might want to jump in and provide an answer. So just for future comments, questions. I had an indication there might be a follow-up board question. Mr. Epps.
Thanks. Because we're on the topic of the football field, wanted to, and we may not be at this point now, but To what extent have we taken into account some of the, dare I say, growing research around the impacts of turf and health and sustainability? And is that something that is that a topic of conversation for us, or is it, just wanted to know to what extent that is even part of the conversation.
I'm smiling. Mr. Kelly, do you want to try to fill, the impact? I've not done the research around that. That's not my forte. So if that's an ask, then, we can pull that. But
So I think that, for me, the pros and cons of turf is all about scheduling. 5 minutes, like right now, it's raining, everything's full of mud. 10 minutes from now, you could be on that field playing again. The districts that we've seen that included turf did it for scheduling. We've seen a lot of districts go to their practice fields or lower, not the football field, let's just say, because things like lacrosse and soccer and field hockey can all be played on those types of fields. And the football coaches get really mad when non-football players rip up their nice turf field or their grass field. So allowing a lot more sports, Title IX, every time we add sports, we need to make sure we're adding sports for both genders and opportunities. So those fields provide a lot more opportunities for sports and for scheduling. That's the main reason for doing that.
I get that, a part of it, so I appreciate it. And it's like the cost and the maintenance, that seems to be, from the few articles that I've read, seems to be some of the leading pros for turf. And so if it's we don't know, that's fine for now. If it's like we're moving forward, and that's fine. But if
what's
it's
the
like,
life of a turf field?
12 years, 15 years. So when you put in a new turf field, half that cost is everything that's underneath it. That's all the drainage, the stone, all that stuff. That's half the cost. So then you have the carpet, which is the stuff you see. Now that gets replaced every 12, 15 years, but all the drainage underneath, which costs as much as anything else, that stays. That's fine. It's just the carpet, the green stuff with the lines and things like that you see over time. Yes, you don't have to mow it, but you actually do vacuum it, which is a little odd to think about. So there is a little bit of maintenance there. It's certainly not what a natural field is. And again, you don't have the holes. You play one muddy football game on a Friday night, and that field's toast for another month. So the turnover on turf and the resiliency of that material is why you see a lot of school districts going that way. It's very much worth it.
It would probably be good for the board and also for the public if we can do a correlation. There seems to be some concerns around the safety implications that turf may cause certain health issues or concerns. Definitely not something we need to answer right here, right now. But in terms of what we're looking at using, and always being in the spirit of transparency, being able to put that out for public consumption would be helpful.
Right. Without answering that, and thank you for getting me out of that question, there are a lot of different fields. There's a lot of different companies. When we put the bids out for the stadium, you're going to get all kinds of emails. And that's just a lot of different groups that sell a lot of different products. So you'll have the ability to go see a lot of those fields, go see a lot of those products, talk to school districts all over the state, the pro fields and things like that as well. There's a lot of good examples out there to certainly rest any concerns anybody has about safety of that product.
I'll yield after this, but that is really, it's less about cost. My concerns were, like, if the research is still growing and we're making decisions now, and then 20 years from now, we know that there's a heightened risk of cancer and other respiratory illnesses as a result of playing on turf, then is it something we at least need to explore and get to know as much as we can now and say, hey, look, community, this is what we've done, this is what we know, we're moving forward with turf because of these reasons, but we know there's still some things that we need to explore if that's necessary.
Definitely
it seems
necessary.
to be, we at least need to explore it.
Without a doubt.
Yeah,
I agree.
and that's it.
Thank you. Any other, oh, well, so let's go back, we'll go back to community questions, but of course, if there are any board questions or comments that come up, please, please simply indicate. I'm seeing no other questions in person. Oh, I know we have plenty on Zoom. Oh, yes, all right, there are some more questions in person. Oh, great. And then we will switch over to Zoom. Sounds great.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lakeisha Rodwell Green. I reside in Elkins Park. I'm co-president of the United Parents Group and also co-president of the Cheltenham High School Band Parents Association. Thank you for the presentation. I have 5 questions, if you'll bear with me. I'll try to go through them quickly. One clarifying question around the presentation for the high school. Is 2041 the time at which we would have enough money, or, well, we would have enough availability of debt to finance a new high school, to borrow money for a new high school?
Yes, so just to explain this graph a little more in depth, the blue lines on this graph represent our current debt service, the district, our current debt service expense, which is right around $10.6 million. When that blue line ends, right in 2041, our debt is finished. So our debt was structured to be level every year until it was completely paid off. At that point, it becomes zero. And unlike a lot of districts, they're having trouble funding large high school projects because of the cost of construction and because of the size of the debt implications. As mentioned earlier, the purpose of this chart is just to show if we look at a future debt implications for a high school, it's going to require the vast majority of our debt availability.
Okay, thank you. But would there be plans to fund other initiatives not stated here between now and 2041?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. The second question I have is if this assessment, I know, and this is, I think, more for the architect, I know that you mentioned assessing population growth or growth in the schools. According to the slides that I saw, the schools are not at capacity, and I'm just wondering if that assessment that you did took into account the gentrification in Philadelphia and closing of schools in the last 10 years. Okay. No problem.
All right. So the study was looking at data that's driven by things like live births, real estate transfers, housing, and things like that. It doesn't take into account anything that may be groups coming out of Philadelphia or things like that. It's kind of looking at, like I said, the capacity of housing that you currently have, whether there's children in them or not. They kind of say, well, at some point, that older group may move on and younger groups come in. So there's always that potential of growth. Certainly if something happened where some schools in North Philly closed and everybody moved in here, that's something you're not able to predict. So the enrollment study that was done was looking at, we'll call more natural and predictable data, like live births, housing, new housing, old housing selling, and the trends of your enrollment growing over the last few years.
Okay, that's understood. My understanding, and so I would just ask that be considered. My understanding is that 40 schools or more have closed in Philadelphia in the last 15 years. So, I think there's room maybe to take that into account. And then third question is regarding the millage rates, which I have tried to research, and they are very confusing, but I know that we have the highest in Montgomery County. And so I'm just wondering if there is any strategic work going on with the township around other ways to increase our revenue. And I don't think that rests on this board to do that solely, but I mean, this is not, in my opinion, a sustainable way to keep funding schools. And I think I'm stating the obvious, but I think it bears stating that we have limited money in our pocket as residents. And I think our millage rate, if based on the data I saw, is 52, and some townships have as low as 22, whatever that millage rate actually accounts for. But there's a big gap there. So I'm just wondering if conversations are happening around how we can increase our revenue.
And I'll just chime in just from under the purview of the Financial Affairs Committee. We talk a lot about millage rates, revenue opportunities, etc. And one thing I will say is that recently, you may have read in the news about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's verdict that across Pennsylvania, schools are not funded appropriately by the state, to the tune of, I mean, I think what Cheltenham's share of that would be is $10 to $15 million worth of funding, if not more. All that is to say, one direct, and since we have a large audience right now, one direct thing that we can and should be doing is speaking to our state representative, who happens to be in this room, Representative Nelson, and our state senator, Senator Haywood, to advocate for filling that gap, which would go a long way to helping our sustainability. In the governor's proposed budget, I believe it was around $2.4 million to Cheltenham. That's a lot. That would be amazing, and that would offset our need to raise that level of funds over the next X years. And that is, again, just a fraction of what the Supreme Court has said we need. So that's one. That doesn't directly answer your question, because you are also, my reading is local businesses,
right.
and I will, without going too far, too deep, and I'd be happy to talk to you offline or after the meeting. Sorry, I'm a nerd, so offline. I don't know if that's used anywhere else. Things like the TIF and the Elkins Estate and other kinds of efforts that have been explored to help businesses and developers invest in the community. So I didn't mean to dominate any answer. If there's any other answer that wants to be shared, but I wanted to share that. All right.
I think Dan covered it well. I would say not all school districts are created equally, and not all tax bases are created equally, which is part of the reason for the disparity in the tax rate. Meaning some districts have the King of Prussia Mall, and other districts don't have large non-residential tax bases.
Thank you. And then, so I'll just add a comment to that, because I think you bring up a good point about the businesses that are here. And then I have just two quick questions after that. But the first is that we do have the Cheltenham Mall, or the Greenleaf. We used to call it the Cheltenham Mall. Now it's Greenleaf. However, I think there is opportunity to make sure that our businesses are functioning well and offering the same level of service as the surrounding towns that, we all know we can kind of, go to those stores and get services that maybe are not offered at our local. So I think there's opportunity there too. And again, I don't think that's for this board, but I just wanted to raise that more for, awareness. And then the final two.
To be aware, if you could ask your last two questions quickly,
I will.
Just we've hit 3 minutes.
So the first one, and I'll take these from my seat. The first question is, for the pre-K through first grade, I'm wondering if that model exists in another district in this area, or in the tri-state area. And then the second question I had, the final question, is how the decision was made to prioritize the athletic fields over other potential improvements at the high school. Thank you.
Give me the last question again, please.
How the decision was made to prioritize the athletic field and athletic stadium development over other potential improvements at the high school. The HVAC is an obvious one, but I think, other things like technology, ability to include, some maybe things for STEM and disability, services and things like that, social emotional support, like other things that could be funded. I just wanted to understand a little bit about how that decision was made as well.
So let me just hit those real quick before you sit down. I'll take the last one first. Anyone who does a study in this area, Montgomery County, that looks at our high school facilities, athletic facilities, in comparison to every surrounding district, it's a travesty, to be honest. When you really talk about equitable experience, ours does not represent that standard. From a technology standpoint, we are not struggling at the high school with tech in terms of new smart boards and things that have been put in place. You had asked a question earlier, will there be other phased initiatives? Once we do our due diligence around the pathways, portrait of a graduate, and so forth, we will very strategically look at what other enhancements can be made, project-based learning, STEM, et cetera. So that is definitely on the radar, but we're trying to prioritize. Anyone who's in the athletics here would tell you we're so far behind. It's not fair to our students. When you look at the pre-K, and Mr. Kelly, we need to reflect pre-K because we say K and 1. It does have to be a pre-K approach for early learning center to even make sense. When this survey comes out and we ask for your feedback, we want the feedback because there will be questions around that. If you look at the model of doing the new 5-6, I believe it was, our early learning center would not cost quite as much. I think that was right around 30 mil. And I don't think with that you would still have to do the addition to Cedarbrook, which is a little shy of 20. You'd be looking at right around 50 million. If we just looked at doing the addition at Glenside and whatever adjustments we have to do, and the addition at Cedarbrook, that's 34.7. We just have to look at things from a numbers perspective. And we need the feedback of the community to see where is your heart as a community in terms of how you want to prioritize, how we move forward. So we're going to put all of this out there so everyone can dissect it.
Thank you. I don't envy any of you that opportunity, but at the same time, I think the question that comes up for me is this what the students want? Is that top on their list too? So
Understood.
Thank you. That's what I was told. Thank you.
The other thing, Dr. Scriven, I think is important to mention is the safety of our students, our our student athletes, because that is one of the concerns that we're addressing here, is ensuring that as our kids are engaging in extracurricular activities, they're in a safe space to do that.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Akeisha Deary. I live in Elkins Park. I am a parent of 3 current Shellingham students, as well as the president of Myers PTO and vice president of Shellingham African American Alliance. And I will, if I can, give this to you in respect of time. I just wanted to bring to the attention of the board some concerns that our Myers community has had for some time regarding the grounds outside of the school. We went on a whole campaign last school year, just expressing what our concerns were regarding. I'll just list them for you quickly. There's insufficient mulch or wood chips throughout the entire school, which apparently is a known thing, but it hasn't been fulfilled as of yet, which is impacting the drainage throughout the school when we have inclement weather. It creates mobility barriers for little people with little legs, as well as older persons who may have some mobility challenges. And in some places you can even see tarp. That's just how scarce it is. We have insufficient upkeep of our grounds. We as parents sometimes I can say personally, the week before spring break, we were out there trying to clean up branches and debris from the steps so that our children and families can access the school, because quite frankly, it was a butcher job done prior to us arriving, but this is a constant. This is not a one-time thing. Last time we had snow, we had parents helping other parents help their children on the sidewalk because there weren't clear pathways to access the school grounds. So this is a consistent concern that had been brought to the attention of facilities several times. Inconsistencies in the landscaping and the maintenance, again, of our school grounds, and just the day-to-day things, trash cans filling to the top. And as you know, schools grounds are open outside of school hours, so communities, you know, I have children, we live down the street from the school. It's not a pleasurable place when it's not safe, and as a parent, we prefer them to go somewhere else. There's sharp exposed metal pieces on the kindergarten playground, which has been brought to the attention of the facilities department before. I have pictures in here for you to see, which has created scrapes and scars as a result of children being children playing on the playground. There is nothing for our middle. If you're familiar with Myers, you know it's a middle school playground, and then it's the blacktop where the older students, the 3rd and 4th graders are. It's absolutely nothing for them to do. They have the Gaga pit, am I saying it right? The Gaga pit to play with, but outside of that, there's nothing. Our principal replaced the netting for the soccer for students to have something to do, but we've asked for very basic things. If we can have painting outlines for hopscotch, king ball, football. We have a teacher, Mrs. Smith, who plays football with the students. Just something for our students to have to be socially stimulated while they have outdoor time. There is
Just
not,
wanted to let you know, you've hit 3 minutes, but.
I'm sorry, I'm almost done.
You're good. No, I'm not trying to cut you off. I just wanted to let you know.
I got you. The Glenwood Avenue entrance is not ADA compliant. So students who may be wheelchair dependent or caregivers cannot access the schoolyard due to the width of that entry gate. And then we just want consistent effort and forethought given to our Myers community and our school. We feel this is basic. These are basic acts, and we just ask that we have just consistency and safety. That's been the topic and the theme tonight.
So we appreciate that. Just like I'm affording Ms. Knox an opportunity to walk the fields with me, reach out, and me and Mr. Holman will come over and walk the facilities. I was just over maybe a week ago. I know there's been some landscaping that's been done. The chips are definitely an issue. I saw that. And you can point out the other areas, and we'll go ahead and start to prioritize and take a look at where we need to start.
Not a problem at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I leave this with somebody?
Please, right there.
All right.
Director of Facilities, thank you.
Thank you. All right. I believe we have,
So just for public note, and you can come up, Ms. Hausberger. For public note, the 2 questions that were typed in chat were around the pre-K. There was a question around busing. Right now, we just need the feedback from the community. Those are things, nothing has been finalized at this point in time. And that's why once we open it up, public feedback is going to be essential.
appreciate that, Dr. Scriven. For the sake of it being read into public record and being in the video, would it be possible to read the questions?
So Josh is going to go through the questions, and
Great.
then the appropriate person can respond to
Okay.
those questions.
Thank you.
Well, can we go here first?
Absolutely, yeah. So as that's coordinated, please, yeah.
Thank you, thank you. I'm Lisa Hessbacher. I'm a resident of Wyncote. I have a child that is out of the district. He's 9, and I am the co-chair for the Special Education Alliance of Cheltenham. We're a small but mighty group, and we always look at a lot of aspects of the work that everyone here on the board and our community is evaluating from a special education lens. So of course I have questions related to special education as we're looking at our facilities and going forward with the future of our buildings in the district. And I appreciate firsthand of everyone's comments and the thorough presentation from the design team. So I think fundamentally, one thing that I was hoping to hear more about that I didn't hear tonight is related to special education students and how we're sort of moving forward as a district with including those students more thoughtfully in the design of our buildings, both from a programming standpoint as well as a design standpoint, looking at ways to include them in classrooms, accessibility concerns, as was mentioned about Myers, and just in general, how we're moving as a district toward more inclusive best practices for our students. Right now, I recognize that there are programs that are run in different buildings. For example, at the elementary schools, there is an autism support classroom. At 2 of our 4 elementaries, there's an emotional support classroom at another building. Another building has a life skills support classroom. And those children have a right to be with their neighborhood peers, the kids that they play with in their communities every day when they leave school. They should be seeing and engaging with those peers during the day. And the only way that they feel a sense of belonging with their peers is to see them every day. And as we're moving forward as a community with deciding the future of what our schools are going to look like and how we want our children to learn and how we want to motivate them intrinsically to find their path toward a career, that same thing applies toward special education students. And they need to feel that sense of belonging and that sense of community. And I know in our facilities master plan, we had conversations around diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion. And I know that there are administrators in front of me that are committed to making that happen. And I think we need to carry that through in our facilities plan. And I think we need to carry it through in the design opportunities that we're offering right now. Universal design is really essential. And I think there are lots of opportunities that maybe we haven't looked at yet, but that we have a responsibility to look at. Accessibility and adaptability of our classrooms, of our buildings. And I recognize this is a huge lift for our community financially, right? Everyone has their priorities about how we should be spending.
Just wanted to let you know we've hit 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Everyone has ideas about how they feel the money should be prioritized, and I think we need to come together and find creative ways to find different types of funding, and maybe opportunities that would allow us once a facility is built, like for example, the high school, the new high school program, the high school stadium project. Maybe there's a way that we can recapture some revenue as a result of that new project. And that's just one tiny example, right? But I think using creative thinking, and we have a lot of, really committed, bright individuals in this community, listening to those people and trying to come up with ways that we can move these projects forward. But in particular, coming back to my original point about ensuring that we are moving in a direction toward inclusive best practices for our special education students. I believe that it's where we need to go for our district to really stand out. We have a real opportunity here, and I would love to take advantage of that.
So I know we just recently met, and I afforded members of SEEK to come to the schools and take a visit.
Yes, you did, and we're looking forward to that.
So I say let's do that.
Yep.
Because some of your wonderings may be answered once you've done that. And part of our mission is to continue to work collaboratively to do what's best for all students. And I'm always going to take that stance and that approach. So I look forward to that journey.
And Dr. Scriven, you have our commitment to partnership as well, so I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm feeling the love. Thank you very much. So, if we could read the questions that have a name and where they're from, if we could read all that into the video, essentially.
Sure, I'll start online. The first question is a Rob Levin of Wyncote. If Elkins Park is not used moving forward, could the divestment of that property offset the costs of other programs and upgrades?
And I guess I will say, if there are answers that warrant, if there's a quick answer, then we ought to.
So, go ahead.
I would say if that decision is made to divest Elkins Park, yes, it could be used to offset upgrades.
So my question is, will it? And we're landlocked. That's part of our problem right now. And if we release that property for what potentially could be viewed as a short-term gain, there's long-term opportunities that potentially we would forfeit. Again, one voice, but that's my concern with taking that approach. This building, if we moved, without a doubt, we would sell.
I agree. I have Isaac Halpern, CHS student. Elkins Park, are there plans to address the leaks in Stretton Hall?
We have a full capital improvement plan, and without a doubt, not just the leaks, but there's other concerns that we know exist at the high school.
Yeah, I would say that this presentation, this plan focus was primarily on our core buildings and our largest projects moving forward. Similar to the next question from the same individual, what are the plans to improve the science facilities at CHS? That would be on a regularly scheduled maintenance or schedule.
And that came up earlier with Mr. Kelly from the standpoint of Cedarbrook. We would take that same approach as we look at a phased-in approach at the high school in terms of revisiting and really, 200 plus mil. We don't have that right now to build a brand new high school. So how do we enhance it? Ms. Rodwell Green just brought that up. That's definitely valid and something we have to have on our immediate radar. I think one thing that will help as we move this out is kind of do a phase 3 to 5, 5 to 10, so that individuals can actually see potentially what's in the pipeline.
Next question is from James Jean, located in Cheltenham Township. The question is, the capital expenditure figures, do they reflect all known projects? Similarly answered before, they reflect the largest projects impacting our buildings going forward. A follow-up question to that, have we evaluated cost reduction measures as well as tax increases? The cost reduction measures and additional revenue searches are constant and ongoing outside of this project. Next question is from Ashley Johnson of Elkins Park. Due to the current conditions of Elkins Park, what is the plan for students that are currently there as well as incoming students? I know a lot of parents there are very concerned about sending our children there. So I think we're here tonight searching an answer to what is the plan for the students at Elkins Park and searching feedback for the end result. So I don't know we have a question or an answer for that question yet as part of this process. Next question is from Kelly Batancilla, sorry, apologize for that mispronunciation, of Glenside, Pennsylvania. Number one, if Glenside is expanded, will there be a second administrator or vice principal hired? Question two, we lose students to other schools because of our athletic programs and facilities. The stadium is a huge need, but what about other sports?
So again, as we move forward, we will adopt a model that makes the most sense for the direction that we go. As I alluded to, we have baseball, we have softball, we have lacrosse, we have others that will be able to play the games and benefit from the new stadium. But there would also need to be a phased approach for what we're doing to address some of the other sports that I know we have a strong parent contingency for. And the question, I don't think we answered in entirety to Elkins Park. There's only but so much we can do right now. We put in all lighting. We painted all of the lockers before this year opened up. We tried to address all of the auditorium seating so that could still be used partially. We redid the gymnasium floor. I just wanted to outline some of the things that we did at EP. And the AC has been updated there. We try to maintain that. It's the infrastructure of EP, which is such a challenge, and the state codes that we don't meet, which make it real hard to do any significant renovations. That's why it would be a tear down. I didn't want to skip over giving an appropriate response for that. Before you go.
Just to add a comment to that question about the athletic fields, this is something that I often forget to mention that comes up with parents. Our field hockey team plays on the front field, and usually they have to, our visiting team doesn't have a field house or somewhere for them to change. So they're on the front field doing that. So I don't know if this is considered in that new model, but that is something that is concerning if the girls play on the front field and they don't have a bathroom or anything to go to change their clothes to play that game. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Next question is from Mercedes Viller of Cheltenham Village. I don't think I understand this correctly. Would fifth stay at each building or all go to Glenside?
So fifth, the ideal right now is that all fifth would feed into their respective zoned elementary school.
Next question is from Dennis Collin of Cheltenham Village. There was a comment about the consideration of programs moving to Glenside. Can you clarify what programs you were considering?
We do not have an answer for that at this point in time. We need to take a deeper dive based on enrollment in each building to see what the space, what space is required first. Then we would look programmatically to see what we would need to do. I'll be very honest, doing the redistricting is a last resort, but that is something we may have to consider as well. I'm not going to not put that on the table.
Shayna Albright of Wyncote asks, can the Early Learning Center start at pre-K, ages 3 to 5? Does the budget include anything for toddlers for pre-K? None of the elementary schools in the area has pre-K. My son should have to attend a pre-K in Philadelphia when it pays school taxes close to $8,400 as a single mother. So the state pre-K program runs in 5-year windows. So the next grant period for pre-K will open up 5 years from last year, so 2028, at which point Cheltenham would have the opportunity to apply on its own with its own separate pre-K curriculum to open up classrooms. We currently host a couple pre-K seats that are offered by the Montgomery County Intermediary Unit and run through Wyncote Elementary.
So to be explicit, yes, that is something that we definitely would want to consider. We have
The
two.
question, just for those on Zoom, the question was clarifying whether we currently have pre-K programs.
Is it one? There you go. Did you get that? One pre-K at Wyncote, one pre-K at Cheltenham Elementary. What's your size, Mr. Toe?
These children are placed in those classrooms by the MCIU.
Right.
This is not a district-run, they're not district-run pre-K classrooms. They are, but they use the space, but the children are not placed in there by the district.
Fair enough.
Next question is from Emily Stein at Wyncote. I have concerns regarding the Early Learning Center idea as a centralized facility on the EP campus. Right now, our youngest students go to more localized buildings. One central location will potentially require longer bus rides for very young students. Also, if pre-K students require drop-off by caregivers, this would result in many more car trips than the EP campus sees, now since most students arrive and depart on buses.
And we would ask, when the survey goes out, if you could just add that into the survey so that we can have your voice captured. We'll also keep your statement from the board doc.
Next question is from Rebecca Condon and from Elkins Park. When you were talking about considering moving programs from existing schools into the newly expanded space at Glenside, were you referring to the special education programs which are currently only in selected schools such as autism support, emotional support, and skills for life? If so, could this be an opportunity to reevaluate how we support these students to see if they could be supported within their neighborhood schools providing services in place?
So thank you for the question. No determination has been made at this point in time.
Next question is from Starlita Johnson of Wyncote. Just wanted to be clear, the children would stay in their home school for 5th grade, or are all students moving to Glenside for 5th?
So they would stay in their home school. That is the ultimate goal. We'll do a deeper dive once again to see if we'd have to revisit that based on districting.
Next question is from Kwanda Beck Robinson of Wyncote. My concern is the classroom size of 25 students or more per classroom. I understand the costs, but would it be more effective to change EP to a K-5 to keep the student-teacher ratio? That was something we did explore and was cost prohibitive.
So again, if that's the majority voice of the community and the direction that the board would want to go, it's something that would be considered.
And I'll just add that that was talked about over the, that was one of the options in the brainstorming table that has come up over the past 12 months. And just to be clear, it ended up being cost prohibitive and versus an early learning center which would still maintain the same rough ratios and be less expensive.
And our enrollment did not warrant having a 5th elementary school.
Next question is from Jennifer Gray. I live in Wyncote and currently have a student at Elkins Park and one at Glenside and am an alumni of Cheltenham School District. Under Pathways 2 and 3, can the large amounts of unused land around the school, including the lower fields and areas to the west of the current building currently occupied by modular trailers, be leased to the township or other entities to generate revenue? And I think the answer is they could be, yes.
They could be, but not a direction that we are considering at this point in time, as we may need the modulars for our own use, depending on how this plays out.
Next question is from Leah Stever from Elkins Park. Referring to a question from another resident, but is it a possibility that Cheltenham would be taking on additional school children from Philadelphia closures, assuming this is directed to Dr. Scriven?
Not at all, unless they were residents of the township.
Next question is from Leslie Chibaub. I apologize if I mispronounced that, from Glenside. Question 1, assuming we are going with pathway number 2, what will be the time frame for the different projects, addition to Cedar Brook and Glenside? And question number 2, how would the addition affect learning and safety at Glenside during construction? And last comment, I really like Dr. Clark's comment, and I'd like to ask whether we have looked into the potential early learning center that would actually free classrooms and remove the need to build new rooms at Glenside.
On both those last two questions, that's really where we need community feedback. We need to make an informed recommendation based on what you want as a community.
Question number one regarding time frame. It was presented in KCBA's presentation that if everything were to start now, there would be a 12-month period for architects to draw up plans for said construction projects, and a 12 to 18-month construction period, depending on the size of the project. Next question is from James from Elkins Park. With regards to the revenue and taxes, James Bronner of Elkins Park. With regard to revenues and taxes, are the project at Elkins Estate and Linwood Hall going to help towards revenue? I noticed that the people who own the old Temple Tyler Art School are putting a church there, and usually churches don't pay taxes. So what is being done so the bulk of the taxes and revenue generation is not on the residents via raising property taxes? As the last speaker mentioned, our financial resources are limited as residents. The roads are not maintained properly. Cost of water is incredible and increasing due to the sale of a public utility to corporate. Safety around schools, parks is not implemented. The principal of Myers should not have to stand outside the school with a stop sign pleading for people to slow down when speed bumps would control that issue. What educational value is given to the students? ? Given today's times of technology, what are the students being introduced to that will help them later?
Sounds like you need to give me a call so we can talk directly.
Next question is from Jamie Woodyard of Rowland Park. Is the air environment in EP currently unsafe for students due to asbestos? Question number 2, do costs include the cost of maintenance of field and added space/building? Does not say.
Yes, as NEP, it says it's the environment and EP currently.
Never.
So the environment has been tested, is safe. What is the second?
The second doesn't specify the location. Do costs include the cost of maintenance of field and added space of building?
I believe, so there was in your slide, Mr. Swigart, an allusion to a lower cost of maintenance and operate. I think the question is asking about what are the ongoing operational costs associated with these projects? And one of your slides broke down some, since it's lower square footage.
Got it. My slide focused purely on utility costs because they're more
Understood.
measurable as opposed to, and larger as opposed to the general maintenance costs.
But I will just so the public understands, we do, through our budgeting process, have a budget for maintenance of our facilities. It's a continuous operation. We also invested in making sure we had an inventory of all the different mechanisms across all of our buildings and what are the anticipated times of life for those. So we're doing preventative maintenance and the like. So I think we have a pretty robust process for continuous maintenance of our facilities.
I guess I'm confused because if we were talking about moving a different direction other than EP, there would be no building to maintain, which is why I think they're just referring to the grounds, which is minimal in the larger scope of things, and something that we would be obligated to continue to maintain.
Next question is from Terry Kelly of Glenside. I'm excited to hear about the upgrades to the football stadium and track and agree that both need to be upgraded in order for our facilities to be on par with those of our neighboring districts. I've heard comments regarding the safety of the current football field track conditions, and I wonder if the safety of the other fields are being considered as well, specifically the baseball fields. Recently, foul poles and a home run fence have been installed on the varsity field to improve the aesthetics of the field, but there are other concerns that impact the safety of the players. First and foremost, the many divots in the field cause what is affectionately known as the Cheltenham hop, but also potential tripping hazards. In addition, there are currently no dugouts, which leave the players without shelter from sun and rain. If money is not available at this time to redo all the fields, are there things that parent groups can do to help with field improvements?
No, those are great questions. I knew that definitely we would be getting some inquiries from our parents and baseball, softball. It needs to be addressed as well. That's just something that we need to prioritize and talk about time frame. I think we need to build out a comprehensive time frame of what will be in the pipeline, as I alluded to earlier, over the next 3 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years.
The next question is from Quandebeck Robinson of Wyncote. You spoke about reaching out to the people and community. How was that feedback conducted? I'm not aware of any staff, parents, or administrators at Glenside being asked or consulted. So I think we answered that with a survey being sent out subsequent to this presentation. Of course, my email address is also part of the presentation that was presented, and everyone can and do not hesitate to reach out to me with any questions or clarification from tonight's presentation. Next question is from Justin Silverman of Glenside. Is there a timeline for when a decision about EP will be made? In what school year would you expect changes to be enacted?
So timeline would be once we've received all the data, 3 weeks from the community, in terms of then being able to analyze and have a deeper conversation around what the next steps would look like. We would come back in this forum and present those findings and revisit the potential options that were put on the table tonight. So within the next couple months, we would hope to know what direction we would be moving.
Next question is from Christina Jebaham from Elkins Park. Are we able to apply for pre-K at the other elementary schools? So that was answered earlier. That's a 5-year window. In 2028, they will open again for Cheltenham School District to apply, and the current pre-K programs we run are run by the MCIU and not the school district.
So just to speak to that, what I will do is get additional information around the pre-Ks at the MCIU, just so that we can put that somewhere on our website, and everyone is aware of that process and what those programs entail.
Next question is from Yvonne Howard in Wyncote. Would we consider MCIU pre-K ? Do we house an MCIU class in Wyncote ? What is the difference between the proposed early learning center compared to an MCIU run program housed in the district?
We own it, for one, which means that there would be more access for more students. I don't want to speak to MCIU's program at this point until I get that information and review it, and then I'll make it public.
Anyone here, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but the MCIU program will be their curriculum, not Cheltenham's curriculum. And our pre-K slots would be 100% guaranteed Cheltenham Township resident slots. Next question is from James Jean from Cheltenham. In consideration of option 1, could a new EP facility assist not only with future capacity, but also a relief valve for current high-class populations? Example, perhaps EP could assist not only with an early education, but perhaps middle school expansion. I'm sorry, there was a couple questions in there I'm reading. So option 1, an EP facility, if built, could assist with future capacity. I'm not aware of high-class populations. And his example, it could assist with capacity issues at early education or middle school.
So I think I should be clear. Right now, we do not have capacity issues, so I don't want that misconstrued. We have a very comfortable staff to student ratio.
Okay, this was jumping around as I was reading questions, so I'm trying to find ones I missed. Rebecca Condick of Elkins Park. If we expand Cedar Brook to include sixth grade, will we be creating an outdoor recreation playground area for students and provide more opportunity for our Cedar Brook students to get an outdoor break during the school day?
We will not be having middle school recess. It sounds like that's the question. They have a very robust extracurricular program, though, that does happen after school.
Next question is from Amy Flynn, teacher at Elkins Park. Dr. Scriven, do you have it in your plan to come to speak to the Elkins Park staff to hear the concerns and clarify any questions about the great impact this will have on the teachers' morale and futures?
Without a doubt, definitely.
Can I interrupt, just because we have a member of the public in person with a question?
I just, excuse me, just had a follow-up question about a couple of the things that have been asked. One, with the switch to K-5 in elementary school, how, with keeping the 4 schools, not adding a 5th elementary school, what would that do to student-teacher ratio in the classrooms? And also, if you did move forward with the early childhood model, would that add a transition? Would the entire district be pre-K to 1? They would then splinter into 4 and then come back together in 6th grade. Am I understanding correctly?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
And that would not add any additional capacity issues. It would just be adding more classrooms at the same staff to student ratio that we currently have.
So it seems like the potential for keep the lower student to teacher ratio would be in the early learning to elementary to K to 6 to 8, where if K to 5 would potentially increase students per classroom?
No.
No. Okay. So the
No.
student to teacher ratio in particularly elementary grades is looking to stay stable regardless of how they're distributed.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes with the questions online.
All right, thank you very much. One more comment, but keep it brief if possible, just because technically the 3 minutes is total, but feel free. I'm not trying to, yeah.
Come
Yeah,
to the
please,
mic
please,
so
please.
they can hear
Yeah, no, I'm, by all means.
Yeah, sure. No. So I just had a follow-up to the early childhood learning model. It's something that I haven't heard discussed. I have missed a lot of meetings this year, so I apologize. But I just wanted to understand what is the thinking behind it. And I know, Dr. Scriven, you mentioned something about, the importance of literacy from an early age. And so can you just speak a little bit about, like, what is really the goal if we wanted to go forward in that direction for a separate school for K to 1?
So it was put out there for just consideration. Let me be very clear, and I've said this to the board. Our teachers are the same. Brick and mortar is brick and mortar. It doesn't matter if they're in the current K through 4 or K through 5 model or in this early childhood model. I think some of the advantages of the early childhood model are some of the resources that you can bring in, the PLC process, the collaborative process. There's some research-based practices that are best suited in that very strategic environment. But best practice in terms of instruction is best practice. So again, I'm one voice. I want the community to kind of weigh in. I definitely have an opinion, but it's not. I've pretty much stated what I wanted to state in terms of the direction that I think we need to go right now. And we really need to look at the financial implications.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm not going to add a whole bunch of questions, but I did think of one important question from my perspective on fund balance. So the slides around fund balance would that include all of our fund balance, or would we have a fund balance remaining just out in terms of best practices?
So the slides I presented include the fund balance that has been directly set aside by the board and the administration for capital projects. It does not include the entirety of the grant.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. And with that, I believe we have covered. Oh, yes. There's another question, or other questions online.
Mr. Schultz, well, that's
Yeah,
being
absolutely.
looked at.
Ms.
Can I
Lovin.
just make one suggestion? For people who are interested in knowing a little bit more beyond what was presented by KCBA in the slides tonight, if you go to our website, cheltenham.org, and look at the Finance Committee presentation from February of this year, February 2024, there is a link to both the video of that committee meeting and the presentation given by KCBA that evening about this very subject that provides more detail. And that may actually answer some lingering questions about some of what we've discussed here tonight. That was a very detailed presentation, that one given in February.
And you can even watch it in 1.5 speed on YouTube, I'm pretty sure. But plus one of that. And I would recommend the video is much more rich than the slides as well, because there was discussion, context provided, and the like. So I do encourage folks to look at that video. Are there other questions online?
There's two that came in. Should we cut off the questions at this point?
That's fair.
Let me read the last two, and then we'll close it there.
Sounds good.
One is from Michelle Robinson of Cheltenham Village, principal of Glenside, the Michelle Robinson. I wonder if you will be open to collecting data in a variety of ways as it relates to feedback. I participated in a variety of opportunities to share feedback for various projects in our township over the last 16 years. In my experience, it takes a lot to secure the number of responses from a survey that makes it feel representative of the full community. I wonder if we could consider school-based meetings to capture a more full response from teachers, parents, and administrators. Duly noted. Yeah. The next question is from Megan Cheeseman. If the plan is to close Elkins Park, what will be the process for relocating teachers? And I don't think we're at that point of the process yet to answer that question. And the final question, I applaud the efforts of the Elkins Park staff and the current principal. As a parent in the community, I would want to know their thoughts on getting rid of Elkins Park as a turnover and decreased morale affects the upcoming middle schoolers, which was more of a comment than a question.
Thank you. And I will just note again, if there are anybody who has additional comments, additional questions, Mr. Swigert has posted his email address. There will be the survey. The school board also has an email address. Feel free to follow up. We're here to listen and here to consider what folks have to say. So with that, I believe we've covered our full agenda. And, oh, Ms. Mulhern.
Sorry, thank you. Real quick. Only because it relates to, I think, Ms. Cheeseman's questions that she just had, and there were some teachers that asked questions, Elkins Park School teachers that asked questions and were in attendance. Could you, Dr. Scriven, I guess just repeat what you said to Dr. Clark regarding her question about teachers that were, staff that were concerned about? I just want to make sure everyone heard that, what your answer was to that,
Yes, ma'am.
please.
So I understand that this is a very delicate topic for anyone that currently works at EP. To me, this is not an indictment on EP, the work that's happening there. This is about the structure. This is about we have a structure which is no longer appropriately serving the needs of our community. This has nothing to do with the human capital. No human capital would be negatively impacted. We've not unpacked what the immediate next steps would even look like because we're not even there in the process. It's merely a conversation where we're putting out the findings of a study to really try to determine what next steps are. So I will be at EP in the near future to really personally field any questions that they may have. But I really need our faculty, our staff to understand this is not about EP other than the brick and mortar structure and what are we going to do to give an equitable experience to the students that have attended there for years. So hope that helps. We're not furloughing. There's no such thing here. So they'll be fine. But I do want to be delicate. And I apologize. I probably should have got over there before this meeting, to be quite honest. But I will go to visit. Okay.
All right, thank you.
I'm gonna make a
Miss-
motion, but
that's
but
fine.
as I make this motion,
Yes.
I do want to share. This is what democracy looks like. So I appreciate. No, truly. I mean, part of the reason why I ran for the school board was to honor the lived experience and have the lived experience inform decisions at the highest level. And so I do appreciate everybody who came out tonight. We appreciate, if I can speak on behalf of the board, we appreciate everybody who came out tonight, virtually, in person. And it's for a good reason, and so all of that is brings joy to my heart, and I look forward to continuing the process. And with that, I move to adjourn our meeting tonight.
First for Mr. Epps, is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Blitzstein, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.